Moments of painful, horrible football make the eventual triumphs all the sweeter. Welcome to the mountaintop, the pinnacle of what a college football program can be. Some stay here for a decade or more. Some visit just to fall back down as fast as they arose. Whatever the case may be, to witness the ceiling of a program is fascinating, often more so than witnessing the floor. Every year there are 1, 2, or more programs that claim to be the very best in the nation. But just like with the worst teams, they are not created equally. Each wins in their own way, against their own competition, with varying levels of domination. And I'm here to determine the best of the best. First, the parameters. Parameters I'll be speeding by as fast as possible because I went over most of them in the first part of this 2-part series. If you want more detail, check that out first. The teams judged will be teams with either a recognized national title, mainly according to the official NCAA website, or the best record on the year. Sometimes they're one and the same, such as the previous 2 years. Sometimes they're not, like in 2008. If multiple teams share the best record, including a national champion and runner-up, both are judged. Group of 5 schools are also allowed. Couldn't make the list without BCS busters. And the sample will go back to the year 2000 due to stats being hard to impossible to find past then depending on the program. Finally, the formula, trademark pending, is the same from the first part. Here's the basic rundown of how it works. Like that, we have our 39 greatest teams, ready to be dissected. 2007 was a strange year. In the whirlwind of odd occurrences and strange juggernauts, many forget that the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors were that year's BCS buster. The Warriors would accomplish this through 3 strategies. First was a high-flying run-and-shoot offense that not only averaged 439.5 yards per game, but led the nation in scoring at 43.4 points per game. Next was a fairly solid defense complete with ball hogs such as Adam Leonard and Myron Newberry, who combined with the rest of the defense to average a little more than 2 turnovers a game. Finally, Hawaii had an offensively weak schedule, the worst of the sample, playing 2 FCS opponents on top of a weak Western Athletic Conference slate. But hey, whatever wins you games. And sure enough, heading into bowl season, they found themselves as the last undefeated team in the country, and were invited to the Sugar Bowl to play SEC runner-up Georgia. Unfortunately, the Warriors would not enjoy a happy ending. Hawaii, in order to get that nation-leading passing game going, lived with letting their inner Brett Favre out and slinging it wherever they could, which led to almost 3 turnovers a game, most of which from interceptions. An elite defense would be able to completely neutralize their air attack, and sure enough, Georgia would do just that en route to a blowout, ending one of college football's strangest Cinderella stories to complete one of its strangest seasons. It's a climb from Hawaii to the rest of the sample, but it's there where you see the first national champions, the least of which being 2003 LSU, followed by various other 2000s teams, along with Clemson and Georgia's more recent stretches of dominance. Each are down here for different reasons. For the champions of the new millennium, each struggled with turnovers. Going further from the modern day, turnovers become more common. This is due to a number of things: bulkier equipment, less QB-friendly rule sets, and a general regression in the passing game. Some teams were able to use this to their advantage to get some of the largest defensive scores in the sample. These teams are not them. The modern champions are more a victim of generalization. Each have great offenses and defenses, yet neither are elite enough to put them further ahead of the curve. Don't get me wrong, they are great teams, great enough to clear or almost clear their competition, yet fall short of the numerous statistical anomalies that lie ahead. Finally, we see the first BCS busters, programs from non-Power 5 or 6 schools that find their way into a major end-of-year bowl, the earliest of which being the 2004 Utah Utes. Each usually have great offenses, defenses, or both, but their overall score is handicapped by their naturally weaker strength of schedule. Football is a team game. To be the best of the best, the sum of the whole must often surpass the individual. Yet sometimes there's a player so transcendent that they, and they alone, can carry their team to greatness. 2010 Auburn is Cam Newton, plain and simple. The Tigers would emerge throughout the year with the SEC's best balanced offense, averaging 214.4 passing yards and 284.8 rushing yards, with Cam Newton leading his team in both, even taking some time to not only notch 20 rushing touchdowns, but a receiving touchdown against Ole Miss.
Is there anything else he can do?
If his Tigers were down bad, like when they trailed Alabama by 24, he'd turn up the heat and will Auburn to victory, again and again and again. Numbers aren't everything, and despite their fairly low placement here, there's no denying how special this team and their star quarterback was. Immediately after them comes a look into the philosophy of the formula itself. The 2017 Colley Matrix National Champions, the Central Florida Citronauts, came in with a final ranking of 23rd, placing them in the top half of the group of 5 BCS busters. Led by former Nebraska Golden Child Scott Frost, Orlando's finest would finish the year as the highest scoring offense of 2017, the only undefeated team of the season, and with the 4th best statistical defense of the 2010s. Except it sure as hell does not look it. 42 to South Florida, 55 to Memphis, hell 33 to FCS school Austin, PA. What gives? Well, going back to how defensive efficiency is calculated, the basic yard efficiency is multiplied by the average turnovers per game. This helps out Central Florida tremendously, who tied 2013 Florida State with the most turnovers per game of the 2010s. Is it fair to judge a softer defense that regularly makes big plays, like UCF, over a stout, suffocating defense that doesn't make those big plays, like Georgia, for instance? For me, at the end of the day, a negative point drive is far worse for an opposing offense than a 0-point drive, and a defense that can consistently force them is, in my opinion at least, a better defense. But it's something to keep in mind going forward. The best defenses will do both at an elite level, but there will be a lot more Central Floridas. Entering the top 20, we begin to see teams specialize, with 2005 Texas and 2014 Ohio State both pairing high-scoring yet turnover-prone offenses with bruising defenses, which, combined with their brutal strength of schedules, bring them here. 2010 TCU, on the other hand, excelled on both sides of the ball, yet, like all Group of 5 teams here, was hampered in the formula, or helped during the season, by a weak strength of schedule. And then, we get to the only program to appear on both the worst and best teams of all time, 2007 Kansas. Sharing the year's best record with Hawaii, the Kansas Jayhawks, 5 years away from entering college football's basement, was 1 game removed from playing Ohio State for the national title, finishing the year with a scoring offense only slightly less efficient than Hawaii's, with 1.6 less turnovers per game. Combined with a defense that only allowed 16 points per game, the Jayhawks would rocket to the top of the AP poll, before succumbing to the 2007 season's curse of number 2, losing to Missouri. While Kansas's stats are loaded, what holds them back is the weakest strength of schedule among Power 5 teams, starting the year with a murderous row of out-of-conference games consisting of 2 MAC schools, an FCS school, and a 1-win Florida International. That, on top of an incredibly weak Big 12 North, would bring their final strength of schedule percentile to .19, lower than some BCS busters. Nevertheless, the wayward Jayhawks finding themselves in this conversation at all is no less impressive. Again, 2007 was a strange year. Immediately after, we have our second Nick Saban-led team, the 2011 Alabama Crimson Tide. This is the first of many Alabama teams, and this one ended up being the least of them. It's here, though, where we see the foundations for Saban's Alabama dynasty, especially during the first part of his tenure at Tuscaloosa. relatively low-scoring ground-based offenses focus on ball security, and strong defenses built to control games. In terms of yards and points allowed per game, this squad actually ranks the highest among the sample, holding their opponents to an average of 183.6 yards per game and a filthy 8.2 points per game. The only thing that holds this rendition of the Crimson Tide back, and what puts it behind many of Nick Saban's other teams, was its strength of schedule. Having played only 3 teams that finished the year ranked, with 2 of those teams being LSU. Going forwards, we arrive at the statistical best BCS buster, the 2009 Boise State Broncos. For many, this program, and this team in particular, is the BCS buster, and one unfortunately snubbed from playing a major program at the end of the year. Nevertheless, Chris Peterson's 09 squad would amass one of the program's best statistical single-season offensive and defensive performances, and shockingly, they had accomplished this feat with only 5 seniors on the roster, making the Broncos the youngest team in the nation by a mile. They'd start their season off with an 11-point victory over eventual Pac-10 champion Oregon, and then they would go on to boat race the rest of the Western Athletic Conference, with their only one-score game coming on behalf of Tulsa. They'd end the year with a Fiesta Bowl berth against fellow perennial BCS buster and number 3 team in the nation TCU, handling business to clinch their second undefeated season, and their place as the 14th best team of the 21st century. Despite being the best Group of 5 team to reach a New Year's Six Bowl, they do not stand alone among Group of 5 teams. For on this list, there are 2 stains. I do not know how they are this high. The rest of this list, to me at least, passes the eye test. It makes sense. This does not, and yet I can't find a reason to put them any lower. 2003 Miami of Ohio and 2011 Houston are the 3rd and 1st best Group of 5 teams on this list, being numbers 16 and 13 respectively overall. How? I'll try to explain. 2003 Miami, again somehow, came out to be not just the best MAC team, not just the best Ohio team, but the best team of 2003, beating out both national champions on the way. Led by eventual 2-time Super Bowl champion quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, the Red Hawks would start slow with an 18-point loss in Iowa City to what would eventually be a top 10 Iowa Hawkeye squad, but would pick themselves up immediately after and blow out Northwestern. From there, they'd blow out every single team in front of them, on their way to the GMAC Bowl against Louisville, finishing tied with LSU and Boise State with the best record on the year. It's this schedule more than anything else that propelled the Red Hawks up this list. Not only did they start the year with 3 Power 5 opponents, but 2003 might have been the most competitive Mid-American Conference ever. 3 teams finished the year with double-digit wins, with wins including number 21 Alabama, number 15 Maryland, and number 16 Purdue, along with a 1-score loss against a top 5 Ohio State. In one of the most competitive Group of 5 conferences of the 21st century, Miami would come out emphatically on top, and somehow reach this list number 16 spot. 2011 Houston is a slightly different story. Conference USA was not nearly the gauntlet the MAC was in 2003, but the Cougars would make up for it with their stats, especially on offense, averaging almost 600 yards per game. It'd be 1 game away from Cotton Bowl berth, becoming a true BCS buster, but Southern Miss had to come and ruin it with a 49-28 thrashing. Instead, they found themselves in the Cotton Bowl, or the Ticket City Bowl against Penn State, where they decisively handle a newly Paterno-less Nittany Lions. Do these teams deserve to be this high? In my honest, divorced from the formula opinion, no. Miami may have the resume, and after all, they didn't even have the worst loss among the other 2003 teams judged. But Houston has little to no reason to be the best Group of 5 team. And yet here it is, and there is nothing I can do about it. As we enter the top 10, we see Alabama. And we don't really stop seeing Alabama. Broken up a bit by 2013 Florida State and 2018 Clemson at 12-9, the Crimson Tide comes out strong with 4 of the top 10 spots. Like with Saban's 2011 squad, most of these teams share the same DNA. An offense and defense built for the sole purpose of controlling games and choking out the competition. The 2015 and 16 teams, despite appearing pretty standard in their base stats and not even winning a title in the 2016 team's case, would be helped for once by their strength of schedule percentiles, being two of the most difficult in the sample at .37 and .36 respectively. Highlights include beating the Big Ten West and East winners, a top 10 Ole Miss and Clemson in 2015, and blowing out an eventual top 5 USC, blowing out the Pac-12 champs Washington, and playing Clemson, again, only to lose by 4 in 2016. It's perhaps the roughest two-season stretch any team has had to play, and the Crimson Tide still left with only 2 losses. Neither are Alabama's best team, however, and shockingly, the COVID year Tide isn't either. Instead, the honor goes to Nick Saban's 2017 squad, finishing number 6 overall. Being the perfect rendition of what a ground and pound offense is meant to be, they'd achieve a final offensive score of 687.43, primarily on the back of their .7 offensive turnovers a game, tying for least offensive turnovers in the sample, along with an absolutely stacked QB room. This, combined with a defense that allow less than 12 points per game and a fairly tough schedule, would bring 2017 Alabama to the forefront of Saban's dynasty. As we enter the top 5, we begin to see the best this sport has to offer. The greatest offenses, the greatest defenses, the best overall, and the greatest to fall short of winning it all. These are the greatest teams of all time. So, why not start with a team with 2 losses? 2007 LSU was the final team left standing in a year of constant upsets. The first 2-loss national champion since 1960 Minnesota, the Tigers, despite 2 triple overtime losses to Arkansas and Kentucky, would find themselves in title contention after Missouri, shortly after beating Kansas, shit the bed against Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. Making the long trip to New Orleans to play a top-ranked Ohio State, they'd promptly take care of business in a 38-24 victory, ending the year with one of the better statistical defenses of the 21st century. Combined with a good offense and tough schedule, 2007 LSU would finish with a total score of 1,726.77, good for 5th best of the 21st century. 2007 LSU needed all the luck in the world to not just make the title game, but get to play it in their own backyard. Turns out, that luck was being taken from their 2011 campaign. To begin with, they were stuck with an absolutely brutal schedule, kicking off with a neutral site game against the top 5 Oregon, then back-to-back ranked matchups with Mississippi State and West Virginia, then back home to take on a ranked Florida, then a ranked Auburn, and then away in Tuscaloosa to tackle second-ranked Alabama, finally finishing the regular season with their annual rivalry game against the number 3 Arkansas. Each and every time, however, they took care of business, blowing out every single team they faced, with the notable exception being Alabama, where they just barely escaped with a 9-6 overtime win, cementing a berth in the SEC championship game against number 12 Georgia, where they, yet again, took care of business. These Tigers were in so many big-time games during the season that College Game Day would bear witness to them 4 separate times throughout their season going into the title game. They'd finally be given a break, it seemed, in that said title game, playing once again in New Orleans, against the only team to give them trouble in the regular season. 2011 Alabama and LSU are built very similarly, having nearly identical offensive and defensive stats, with the only clear difference between the two being a night and day strength of schedule. Yet even being far more battle-tested, national title rematches more often than not favor the previous losing team. And sure enough, the 2011 Tigers would fall 21-0, and Nick Saban would claim his second title with the Crimson Tide. Despite this, they remain ahead of the year's national champion here, primarily due to the gauntlet they had to face to even reach the matchup, finishing with a final score of 1,749.23. just barely ahead of the 2007 champions. At the final three, we finally reached the statistical leaders, the best offenses and defenses of the sample, beginning with the juggernaut that was the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. Remember back to some of the other early 2000s teams, how their scores were decimated by the more turnover-prone game at the time, and how some teams took advantage of that atmosphere to create absolutely absurd defensive performances. None, even the best, can hold a candle to what Larry Coker and his Hurricanes were able to accomplish. 4.1. That's the average turnover count the Miami defense was able to force, most coming from interceptions at the hands of cornerback Philip Buchanan and eventual Super Bowl champion safety Ed Reed. Miami's defense wasn't just ball hawks either, with a defensive line built for the pros helping hold opposing offenses to 270.9 yards per game and 8.6 points per game. All in all, the unit would gain a final score of 10.98. Far outclassing any other defense in the sample, being the only defensive multiplier to enter the double digits, more than making up for the relatively pedestrian offense. All this, combined with a surprisingly tough Big East schedule, primarily being propped up by a 4-game stretch of back-to-back-to-back-to-back ranked wins, culminating in the Rose Bowl victory over postseason rival Nebraska, the 2001 Miami Hurricanes would finish with a final score of 1,822.72, and the third best team of the 21st century. Now that the best defense is covered, let's move on to the best offense. 2019 LSU was brought up briefly in the worst teams video, but let's focus in on them because they have what might be the best offense of all time. Averaging 48.4 points per game and 401.6 yards per game through the air alone, along with averaging less than a turnover a game, they'd finish with a final offensive score of 771.63, by far the highest of the sample. What's more impressive, however, are the teams they were doing this to. They'd handle 7 top 25 teams, 4 of which finishing in the top 10, by a combined score of 298 to 190. Including a 63-28 evisceration of Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma in the playoffs. While the face of this historic offense is undoubtedly Ohio State transfer Joe Burrow, he'd be assisted with an all-star cast of future pro talent including Jamar Chase, Terrace Marshall Jr., and Justin Jefferson. The final game of the year would pit them against the defending national champion Clemson, the successors of Dabo Swinney's best Tiger squad, and the Bayou Bengals would demolish them 42-25. They finished with a final score of 1,873.28, just above the 2001 Canes for the second best team of the 21st century. Before getting to the best team, it's worth looking back beyond the year 2000 for a second to evaluate some earlier teams I was actually able to find complete stats for, after, of course, listing teams I wanted to evaluate but could not due to lack of end-of-year stats. 1945 Army, 1956 Oklahoma, 1972 USC, 1986 Penn State, 1988 Notre Dame, and 1991 Miami. Beginning with the only Group of 5 team to win a national title in the modern era, meet the 1984 BYU Cougars. With Robbie Bosco under center, the Cougars would average 377.6 yards per game through the air, allowing for the menacing Mormons to blow out most of their competition en route to becoming the only undefeated team left in 1984. Unfortunately, they played absolutely no one. The win that rocketed them to the top of the polls was a season opener against an, at the time, number 3 Pitt. A Pitt that ended the season with a losing record. No team BYU faced, in fact, would finish ranked, and their Holiday Bowl win against the 500 Michigan wasn't necessarily convincing. They'd finish the year with a final score of 664.65, second to last on the sample, just above 2007 Hawaii. 1991 Washington was one of many split title winners from the years before the Bowl Coalition, winning the Coaches Poll while Miami won the AP Poll. In stark contrast to their winless 2008 campaign, their undefeated 1991 season would be headlined by the year's best defense, holding their opponents to 237.1 yards per game while forcing 3.33 turnovers a game, giving them a defensive score to rival even Miami's star-studded 0-1 unit. They'd finished the year out in the Rose Bowl, demolishing a top 10 Michigan 34-14, and gaining the Pacific Northwest first, and as of now only, national title. They finished with a final score of 1,537.44, putting them at number 8 on the list, above 2018 Clemson and above every other West Coast team in the sample. Finally, sticking with the 90s, we encounter another claimant for the best team of all time, 1995 Nebraska. Tom Osborne's finest team, the 95 Cornhuskers, would dominate each and every team they'd play, with what might just be the greatest ground offense the sport has ever seen. 439.8 rushing yards per game, 5.1 rushing TDs per game, with significant carries from bell cow Amon Green and dual-threat powerhouse Tommy Frazier. This dominant offense, combined with a stout defense, would ensure not a single game would be decided by a single score the entire season, including, famously, the national title game against the Florida Gators, who'd they destroy 62-24 in the largest national title blowout until 2022. The 95 Cornhuskers would finish with a final score of 1,808.55, being hindered slightly by a particularly weak Big 8. Putting them at number 4 on the list. And like that, we finally reached the summit, the pinnacle of 21st century college football, the greatest team in the sample. 2008 Florida. Now, understandably, some alarms might be going off here. Did I make 2 videos and an entire formula just to make the 08 Gators the best team of all time? Somehow no. But I have a ton of explaining to do. Led by Heisman winner and assured future NFL superstar Tim Tebow, coached by the ever-above-the-line Urban Meyer, and assisted by future Pro Bowlers Carlos Dunlap, Marquise Pouncey, and a tight end I can't really remember at this moment in time, the Gators would finish the year with the highest score of the 21st century at 2,121.75. How? The 2008 Gators do not lead in any phase of the game, unlike number 3 and 2 do, but what pushes them further is their lack of a weak unit. 0-1 Miami, despite having an all-time defense, had a comparably alright offense, which held their score back. 2019 LSU, despite having perhaps the greatest offensive year of all time, had a defense that was fairly middle of the pack in comparison to the other teams in the sample. Florida, on the other hand, had the sample's 6th best offense, 8th best defense, and 2nd ranked special teams. Equally dominant in all phases. The Gators are helped further by the competition they did this against, playing 5 teams that finished the season ranked, including their sole 1-point loss to Ole Miss. After that loss and subsequent promise, Meyer's Gators would sweep the rest of their slate. 51-21 to LSU, 49-10 to Georgia, 45-15 to Florida State, and finally a pair of 10-point victories in the SEC title game against Alabama and a national title game against Oklahoma and Heisman Sam Bradford. And like that, there it is, the best team of all time, 2008 Florida. Except when going through the honorable mentions, there was a team that stood out like a sore thumb. A team considered by many as the best team of all time. And one that thankfully still has its complete end-of-year stats intact. Welcome back to Lincoln. 1971 Nebraska is a team that breaks the formula, and is the primary reason for including select teams outside of the 21st century that I could actually judge. 2001 Miami's defense was phenomenal, by far the greatest defensive performance in recent memory. But even it pales in comparison to what this team did. The Husker Blackshirts would, similarly, take away the ball around 4 times a game, but would also hold their opponents to 130.5 yards per game. Not passing yards, not rushing yards, total fucking yards. Less than half of what Miami's already terrifying defense was capable of holding the offenses of 2001 to. In the formula, it produced a defensive multiplier of 16.98, somehow far surpassing a defense that stood far above the defenses of its own time. This humiliation wasn't being done to cupcakes either. 31-7 to Colorado, 37-0 to Iowa State, 36-0 to Missouri, 38-6 to Alabama in the Orange Bowl. The only game that even be a contest was against number 2 Oklahoma in Norman, a game considered by many to be the greatest game of the 20th century, ending in Nebraska's favor 35-31. The 71 Cornhuskers would finish with a final score of 2,272.47, the greatest team of all time. What does it say about college football that the greatest team ever was one from the 70s? Decades and decades of refinement, improvement, analytics, and this team that the average person likely cannot even remember is on top. What does it say about football that 2008 Florida, a team that couldn't even go undefeated, ended up as the best team of the 21st century to date? What does it say about college football that, in most cases, when both the national champion and runner-up was judged, the runner-up usually ended up the better team? What does it say about college football that a MAC school that people likely can't even point out on a map stood above both of Ohio State's modern champions? What does it say? Nothing. College football is a game that transcends numbers, a place where objectivity ceases in the face of gut feelings and vague concepts of momentum. Is this an objective list of the best teams? I mean, it is if you want it to be, but at the end of the day, the game cannot be played with stats, with equations, with algorithms, and to judge teams in that way is a fun thought experiment, sure, but probably futile. The game is played on a field, each and every fall Saturday, and the greatest team is simply the one that can win.